Welcome back, baseball fans, to the 1978-81 Fall League wrap-up show. World Series has concluded. We've got to look at some composite boxes of the two teams and some more analysis of that. We can look at some year-to-date numbers and some year-to-date comparisons, and just do a general wrap of the year that's just taken place, the Fall League. And let's start just immediately with the World Series, putting this to bed here. We're going to start with the runner-up, the California Angels. And here we are looking at their stats right here for the World Series. They were hit 279 and 472. This was a hitter's World Series. I guess you could say all the games were in California. The weather was probably warm in October, so the ball carried, and it wasn't one of those bitter cold World Series where it was pitchers dominating. And the funny part about it is the Angel average was not quite as good as the Dodgers, and the ERA wasn't quite as good as the Dodgers, but they technically scored a few more runs. If you look really closely here, they scored they scored 39 runs in the 7 games and only gave up 39 and 37. There were plus 2 runs scored, but you might recall there were a couple of blowouts in the series. The Angels blew the Dodgers out twice, and they lost a bunch of close ones. A lot of familiar names who stepped up. Carney Lansford was just on base most of the time. 467 probably could have been the overall league and the overall World Series MVP had his team won. He didn't hit a homer, had 6 RBI though in 7 games. Scored 8 of the 39 runs, mostly from the leadoff spot. The thunder came from Grich and Baylor, but then you have this surprise guy, Pocoroba, hitting 2 homers and 21 at-bats. That was pretty cool. Bob Molinaro, we talked about him a lot in the broadcast, hit 360, 467 on base. So there's plenty of pop for the Angels. Brian Downing actually fell off a lot in the last 3 games of the series after a hot start. So he finishes 222, and that was actually fell under the radar when the games were being played. Didn't look like he was struggling that much, but he was tearing it up in the American League Championship Series versus Baltimore. And then Dan Ford, he didn't really have that good a year anyway. And we'll have a wrap-up end of eliminating the California Angels will be a separate video as they move forward. But just for the World Series context, you had Tanana had the 3 starts. And Game 7 skewed everything because Game 7 he got knocked out in the 2nd inning, giving up 8 runs. So that just makes this line look horrible. He actually pitched much better in the World Series for the first 2 starts, but then you take the 8 runs away in an inning and 2/3, and he's more around 350 with an ERA. So that just killed the Angels. Ryan, interestingly, pitched 19 and 2/3, but only had 2 starts, as he had a relief appearance in there, 366 ERA. The bullpen, Clear did lose that 1 game on the error and an unearned run, the big Game 6 loss in extra innings, which ruined the Angels' season to that point. But actually, 8 home runs, they hit 8 home runs. We'll have to look at the Dodgers in a moment. They stole 9 bases. Baylor, and they got them all over the place, which is, Socha has a -1 arm, Trino has a 0 arm, so that's pretty aggressive on the bases. 353 on base. There's a lot to like in this offense, a whole lot to like. And you take away Tanana's unfortunate start, and there's some decent stuff in the pitching staff. Hartzell still didn't, and Baumgarten really didn't do much at all. So it's a 2-man pitching staff of Ryan and Tanana with Mark Clear and Lance Ralston setting things up. And Dyer Miller was okay in long relief, and he was, not the greatest during the season. Now let's take a look at the Dodgers in comparison. And we'll scroll down here and bring them up. And there we are. So you see they scored 37. They gave up the 39, but they won 4 of the 7 games. And they had 11 home runs. So the 2 teams combined for 19 home runs in the 7 games, which is pretty high. But there's Steve Garvey with 5 home runs in 7 World Series games, 13 RBIs, and a .393 average. That's one of your best 7-game World Series performances you're going to find in any kind of league. You can really, I mean, you can compare this to any World Series really, and yeah, and Gibson out hit him by a few points and got some steals in there. But the Dodgers, when we look at their end of eliminating video, we'll see that they carried the lumber throughout the lineup. There wasn't one guy leading the charge. And here, all the familiar names: Reggie Smith, Dusty Baker. They hit .310, so they hit for higher batting average than the Angels. And the pitching staff pitched a little bit better. Let's start with Sutton, who had the 3 starts. So basically, Sutton and Tanana, Sutton won 2 of the 3 starts they faced each other. And really, Sutton pitched fantastically his last 2 times out. The first time, game 1, he didn't pitch very well at all. But he managed to pitch long into the next 2 starts to get the ERA at 2.38. Would have been a series MVP had it not been for Garvey's outrageous numbers here. Not to mention that Garvey hit 2 home runs in the first 2 innings of Game 7 when all the money's on the line. Sutton pitched well in Game 7, but he had to support early. Also, you have to give some credit to the Dodger bullpen. Tom Bruno, an interesting guy who bailed out Sutcliffe, bailed out Umbarger, bailed out Bert Hooton for 6 1/3 innings. Nice. Steve Howe got his saves when he was asked to get them. Saved half. Got a win, saved 2 others with not giving up an earned run. So that's pretty impressive for Steve Howe. You know, Hooton is rather mysterious because he threw a shutout, or he threw shutout innings in one of the starts, and then he got lit up in the other one for a 7.94 ERA. Rick Sutcliffe wants to forget this World Series. Yeah, it was dreadful. And yeah, so the 4.50 ERA, a little bit better than the Angels. That's a little bit better than the Angels, and the 2-run difference, you know, was because of a blowout. Actually, Davey Lopes only stole 1 base, which is interesting. And Brian Downing had a +1 arm. So it shows that the Angels were a heck of a lot more aggressive than the Dodgers on the bases because I think they needed to be. They lacked the talent in the starting rotation and in the bullpen. Dodgers are a better team. They have really no offensive weaknesses. They have good defense, good rotation, and a good bullpen. And that's everything you need. So congratulations to the Dodgers. We're going to flip over here. I could briefly go look at those 2 teams' year-to-date numbers just for a moment, see if anything stands out. Though they'll have their separate wrap videos. Here's your year-to-date for the 2 teams. You see that Downing was once hitting .328. Now Lansford called him with that Dynamite World Series for his team's batting title. They had 46 home runs, a couple guys with 11. And then you see Ryan and Tanana, 92, 93, all by themselves. There, 18 of the 26 wins on the team. And let's go peek at the Dodgers again, year to date. And you see Garvey has risen to the top now of his team, the .333 batting average. Gibson, his MLB card hits .328, and so Gibson hit .328. Only 5 homer, but 33 RBI, 15 stolen bases. What a nice line that is. Garvey, 14 homer and 46 RBI, just an MVP performance for a .277 ball club. Sutton, 10 wins, .253 ERA. His next best guys, Sutcliffe and Hooton, both had ERAs over 5. Really strange, but I guess that's World Series is factored in. Didn't really have another starting pitcher helping Sutton out significantly. These wins are because of the offense, you would think. But you notice the top 4 ERAs is the bullpen. And while I didn't mention Bobby Castillo, I didn't mention Terry Forster. But the whole bullpen was 5-2, 12 saves. And they pitched, 90, 99, 106 innings with an ERA below 2. So, outstanding bullpen work. A great bullpen and good defense. And you know, Bill Russell and Davey Lopes are 3 defensive infielders. That's not that great, but it's good enough when you're getting 1 defense at first and Garvey, and Baker is at 2, and Ronsay's at 2, and it's good enough defense. But the thing that defines the Dodgers the most for winning it all, look at the lumber, how it's distributed nicely through a bunch of guys. they don't rely on just that one guy up top there. Unlike the Phillies and Mike Schmidt were all by him. He was all by himself with one other guy. And Willie Stargell, Dave Parker did well, but that was about it. Here you got him and even Gibson, of course, but you got Baker and you got Smith and even Willie Horton batted 8th all year and had 7 homers and 18 RBIs in the 46 games, batting 8th. You know, and Lopes had 7 homer and 23 RBI, leading off with 29 stolen bases. So it's just too many great players on the Dodgers, all not being terrible. When you look at the bottom players, it's utility guys, Trevino and Norris, no big deal. But you don't see starters down here struggling with like 150 at-bats down here. Sure, Davey Lopes is down here. At least he had a 339 on base and all those stolen bases. And yes, Roncé's down at 241, but he still has a 348 on base. I get it. It's still, this. You put these numbers together, you're probably going to be winning a World Series. And they did. So that's the World Series wrap. And at the same time, we'll look at the end of year stats for, well, let's take a peek at the overall. You know, George Brett finished at 429. That was his final number. And then Stargell, there's Stargell. He finished at 431 with 18 homers. That's what I mean. I mean, these guys were just destroying it, but they didn't have a lot of help. And look at Mike Schmidt, 404, 1341. But they didn't get a lot of help from a lot of their teammates there in the top of the league. And then, you know, you can scroll down and find who was really slumped this year. If there's any sort of, you know, somebody important or famous there. Well, right here, remember Baltimore? I was telling you they were the worst hitting team in the league, went to the league championship series. There's 3 of their players hitting below the Mendoza line there, right here. So that would explain that. And then in the National League, I think, oh yeah, here's one. Wow, isn't this sad? This is not a misprint, folks. This really did happen. So benches 70, not the 81 card. Which one do we use? I think we use a 78 card. Yeah, he had 103 at-bats, and this is what he did. He did not hit a home run. Can you imagine that? Maybe it's the law of averages catching up to Johnny in one little season, because we know his 1970 card just dominated in the summer league for 4 years in a row, making, you know, historic numbers for homers per games played. So maybe there was a balance, and he had to struggle one of his years. And sure, Reds didn't make the playoffs, and that kind of happened. Very weird, just bizarre for him not to hit a home run. That was just so weird. Heck, he'll automatically be the comeback player of the year next year. Look at the total innings pitched now. Once you factor in the World Series and the regular season, you know, Don Sutton, if we were awarding the Cy Young, we'd give it to Sutton once everything's done. But I treat things fairly, and when the regular season's done, those awards go out, and Bibby got it. Because Bibby had 7 wins during the regular season. And Sutton got a lot of those wins in the wild card and divisional, league championship, and World Series. So that's why Bibby got... Plus, Bibby got roughed up. He was 7-0. He got roughed up in his postseason start. And then over in the American League, the Baltimore pitchers are usually up here somewhere. Here's McGregor, still 212. Probably see Flanagan up here. There's Flanagan, 258. There's Nolan Ryan and his 9 wins, 255. Tanana's going to be up here somewhere. There he is. There's Tanana right here, 332. We gave Guidry the Cy Young during the regular season because of the brilliant ERA and 78 innings. He actually got this 4th loss and 10 decisions in the wild card game, losing 1-0 to Mike Flanagan, who also finished 6-4, weirdly. So that's your pitching. Is there any? I'm going to just scroll down, see if I see any outliers for saves. Quisenberry had 11 for a Kansas City team that flopped in the postseason. Let's see if there's any really outlier pitching stats over here. Suter had 11 saves for a brilliant season for the Cubs. Got to the playoffs, but couldn't get a lead in the wild card game. So that's how you beat Suter. You don't get a lead for the Cubs. We've got ERAs. Mentioned Baltimore and New York. Expos. Here's the Dodgers, 374. The Angels, I don't know if they're going to be up. There they are, 417. Yeah, that's because it's a two-man pitching staff, plus Mark Clear is a pretty good closer. Not a great one, but pretty good. And that's why that number's high. Let's go over on the offensive side. Portland, would you believe they end up finishing over 300? And that is really an outlier, a one-year wonder. Good luck to them repeating that, but that's pretty remarkable. Here are your Dodgers again, way down here in 277, nothing to sneeze at. Ended up piling up 63 home runs overall. Got a bunch of those in that World Series. The Angels should be around here somewhere with them. They were good year-round, were they? They're down here. 261, you know what? I think that's a little bit low. 261 with all those great Angel hitters. Like I said, Dan Ford was in a slump. The shortstop position was bad. The DH position was bad. And Brian Downing slumped at the end there. And then the worst teams in the league. So when you look at the final results here, you know, Baltimore was the wild card team that knocked out the Yankees, so they got extra games played. So they play 590 ball with 23 wins. The Indians didn't win a playoff game, nor did Kansas City. And there's your 26-win Angel team, best record in the American League. Year to date for the league, they're a game under 500, which is the World Series, 4 games to 3. So 26 wins and a game under 500 for the American League. And the National League is a game over because of the Dodgers winning more games than anybody. They won 28 games. You know, Portland, Las Vegas, and the Pirates and the Cubs only won 1 game between them. That's why 20 is the high mark here. And the Braves got all the way to the League Championship Series before they bombed, which is why they finished with just 21 wins. And then they won 4 out of their first 5 postseason games, and then lost 4 out of their 5 last postseason games. So when you add it all up, check out the magic number, 500 wins and losses. And let's get to the last part of this analysis, then we'll call it. We'll go back to team stats. And in team stats, we have, for the league, we have the American League team stats and National League team stats. Interestingly, yeah, they didn't play interleague play out in the World Series, so they can be evaluated. The National League hit 280 to 267, and the ERA was up accordingly. So the National League had more of the bigger bats in it than the American League did. But the most critical stats are the cumulative stats. Here's your 500 wins and 500 losses. This is your league batting average and your league ERA. And I can go back to compare and see how these rank. So this is 2022, so I can go back to 2021. When I do that, right here, it's 267 with a 404 ERA. So it was better pitching in the previous season and just a couple more games played, 502 games played, which is pretty consistent year to year, the quantity of games played. And then if I go back 2 years to 2020, here's 2020, 498 games played, very close, you know, within a couple games of those other two. But look how high the ERA and the batting average was. And in that season, this would have been the 76, 77, 78, 79 season, I believe. Let me check Boston. See what I got. That's how I'll know. Yeah. So Boston won 31 games and to win the World Series in a year full of offense. Does that make sense? I guess so. Boston, you want offense and not necessarily pitching. Tiant was 8-4 and Bill Lee was 7-3 in that particular year. Phillies lost that World Series. Let's see if I got the Philly cumulative in here somewhere by comparison. This is 2 years ago, so this is 76, 77, 78, 79, and the Phillies would have won 3 divisions in that time. And you see they were 28-16, a record comparable to the Dodger record that won the World Series this year. But the batting average 274. Look at the team ERA, and Christensen was 8-1, but Lefty was 4-6. Look at this Brent Strom free agent going 7-1. It's just real fluky. And where Luzinski and Schmidt are putting up the big numbers there. Again, that's 2020. I go back to 2019, but these stats are from the Summer League. So it's the 622 games in a mixed timeline. And I can continue to go back on this, but we'll pause it there. That's the end of the year wrap for the World Series and the 78-81 season. The next things we'll do, we'll give you the California Angels end of year elimination and the Dodgers end of year elimination, and then we'll put the 1978 cards away, which is like a fun video I do for reconciliation purposes. And then from there, it's getting into the off season and seeing what teams do as the 78 season is gone and the 79, 80, 81, 1982 season arrives. And that'll be a fun season because I believe in 1982 we will see the likes of Cal Ripken, Wade Boggs, Tony Gwynn will be getting into the league. So thanks for checking this out, folks, and we'll see you next time.